The galaxy had almost forgotten about humans. For centuries, the stars had been ruled by alien empires, cold, advanced, and cruel. They believed humanity had been destroyed long ago, erased in a war nobody dared to speak of. But in the deep halls of a prison ship drifting at the edge of space, one secret remained alive. He was not just any prisoner. He was the last human. And the guards who watched him were not proud protectors. They were afraid. 2 alien soldiers stood outside his cell, their green faces hard and their armored suits gleaming under the harsh, white lights. They held their rifles tightly, their claws twitching as if expecting the prisoner to break free at any second. Inside the cell, the human sat on a metal bench, his wrists bound in heavy chains. His arms were thick with muscle, his eyes sharp and unblinking. He said nothing, but the silence around him was heavier than any words. Rumors spread across the galaxy about this human. Some said he was the last survivor of Earth, a world that once produced warriors who could fight entire armies alone. Others said he was a weapon in human form, born to destroy. The alien council had debated for years what to do with him. Killing him seemed too dangerous. Keeping him locked away felt even worse. Every soldier who guarded him admitted the same thing. When they looked into his eyes, they felt fear. The council gathered in their great chamber, a massive hall of stone and steel, filled with the voices of alien leaders. They argued loudly. One side said the human must never be released. He was too dangerous, too unpredictable. Another side, desperate and trembling, whispered that the galaxy might not have a choice. A new threat was rising from the dark edges of space. Entire fleets had already fallen. Whole planets had been burned to ash. And their weapons, the strongest the galaxy had ever built, had failed. Some said only the human could fight it. The idea was unthinkable. Why trust a death-worlder? Why place the galaxy's fate in the hands of a creature bred for war and survival beyond reason? But still, the words echoed through the chamber. Release him, or we all perish. Back in the cell, the human waited. He had been a prisoner for so long that time itself felt like a blur. Yet he was never broken. Every day, alien soldiers tried to look at him with power, but he always looked back with something greater. He had seen battles they could not imagine. He had walked through fire and survived. The aliens thought he was caged, but in truth, he was only waiting. One of the guards, younger than the rest, leaned closer to the bars. His voice shook as he whispered to his partner, "Why do they keep him alive? Why not end it?" The older guard stared straight ahead, his face pale. "Because they can't. You've seen what happens to those who try. Ships destroyed, men torn apart, and he didn't even move from that bench. Do you really want to test what happens if the chains come off?" The younger guard said nothing after that. The human finally lifted his head, his eyes glowing faintly under the lights. He didn't speak, but the guards felt his gaze crawl into their minds, cold and sharp. It was not magic, it was not power. It was something far worse. It was the presence of someone who had survived everything, someone who had lost everything, and someone who had nothing left to fear. In the council chamber, the debate grew louder. An alien commander slammed his fist against the table. "We will not survive without him," he shouted. "Our fleets are gone. Our soldiers are broken. The enemy moves closer every day. This human is the only weapon left to us." Another voice hissed from the shadows. "You would unleash the monster? Do you not remember what his kind did before? They nearly destroyed the galaxy once. If we release him, it will not matter if we win the war. He will turn on us all." The council fell into silence. The choice was impossible. But the sound of war drums echoing across the galaxy made silence feel like death itself. Back in the prison ship, alarms blared. A fleet of unknown vessels had entered the system. The guards turned in panic, gripping their weapons tighter. The human simply smiled for the first time in years. He whispered one sentence, his voice deep and calm. "Looks like you finally need me." The guards froze. For years he had said nothing, never wasting a single word. Now he had spoken, and the weight of his voice shook the air. The younger guard swallowed hard, fear in his eyes. "What if he's right?" the older guard whispered. "Then the galaxy is already his." The alien council received the report of the incoming fleet. Fear swept through them. Worlds would fall, empires would collapse, and so the decision that once seemed impossible now became the only choice left. They would have to release him. But none of them understood the truth. The last human was not simply a prisoner. He was the storm waiting to be unleashed. And when the chains finally broke, nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The prison ship drifted in the cold dark of space, its metal walls humming with the sound of engines and shields. For years it had been nothing more than a cage, silent and forgotten. But now alarms flashed red through every corridor. The crew ran, shouting orders, their voices shaking. Unknown ships had appeared beyond the outer rim, their silhouettes like shadows of nightmares. No one recognized their design, no one knew their name, yet everyone understood the truth. The enemy had arrived. In the heart of the ship, the human remained seated, his wrists still bound by glowing chains. The alarms did not frighten him. He listened quietly, his head tilted slightly as if hearing music only he could understand. The guards moved nervously outside his cell, their weapons raised, not sure whether to face the enemy outside or the man inside. One guard spoke, his voice cracking. "The fleet will fall. Our weapons will not hold. We are trapped." The older guard clenched his jaw. "Don't say that. We still have defenses. We still have commanders." But the human's quiet laugh silenced them both. It was not loud, not cruel, just a low sound, almost like a whisper carried by fire. The guards felt their throats tighten. "Your weapons will fail," the human said at last, his voice calm. "Your commanders will run, and when they do, you will turn to me." The guards stepped back as if his words were a strike. Fear tightened around their hearts. He was chained, yet he spoke as though he owned the ship. And the worst part, they believed him. Across the galaxy, fleets had fallen to the same shadowy enemy. Reports whispered of cities burned in minutes, of soldiers slaughtered without a fight. Whole empires begged for mercy, but mercy never came. Now those shadows had reached the prison ship, and inside, the galaxy's last human sat waiting. The alien council gathered in panic. Messages flew across their networks, warnings, pleas, desperate strategies. Nothing seemed enough. The enemy tore through their forces like fire through dry grass. No matter how many ships they sent, no matter how powerful their weapons, nothing slowed the advance. At last, one voice cut through. The noise. The commander who had argued before stood again, his words sharp and heavy. "You all feel it. You all know it. We cannot win this war without him. Release the human." The chamber erupted. Cries of anger, fear, and disbelief echoed against the walls. "Madness!" one leader shouted. "He is death itself," another hissed. Yet beneath the rage, there was silence in their eyes, the silence of people who had already lost hope. Meanwhile, in his cell, the human closed his eyes. For years he had been still, silent, watching, waiting. But now the galaxy trembled, and he felt it like a storm pressing against his skin. The enemy was close. His chains hummed with power, but deep inside he knew they could not hold him forever. The ship shook violently as explosions rang out in the distance. The enemy had begun their attack. The lights flickered, the metal groaned. The guards outside the cell stumbled as the floor shuddered beneath them. "They've breached the outer hull," one shouted. "We're finished." The human stood slowly, his chains rattling. His height, his frame, his presence filled the cell like a force of nature. He stepped forward until the glow of the energy bars lit his face. His eyes blazed, steady and unbroken. "You are not finished," he said softly. "You are only at the beginning." The guards froze. In that moment, it no longer felt like they were guarding him. It felt like they were standing at the edge of something far greater, something that would swallow them whole. Outside, alien ships screamed through the void, their weapons burning against the unknown attackers. But every blast, every missile, every desperate strike fell short. The enemy's ships moved like shadows, absorbing light, bending around attacks, tearing through defenses with ease. Entire wings of the fleet vanished in moments. On the command deck, the ship's captain trembled as reports poured in. "They are inside the perimeter. We cannot hold them. Reinforcements are gone." His voice cracked as the truth struck him like a blade. There was only one path left. He sent the message to the council. "The fleet will fall. Only the prisoner remains." The council argued no more. In their silence, their fear spoke louder than words. At last, the order was given. Back in the prison hall, the guards received the command. Their claws shook as they unlocked the security gates one by one. Each barrier hummed as it powered down, the walls trembling as if the ship itself feared. What was coming? The last door opened. The chains still glowed, binding the human's wrists and ankles. But when the guards stepped closer, the human looked at them, and they froze. His eyes told them the truth. They were not releasing him. He was allowing it. The older guard whispered, his voice breaking, "If we set you free, will you save us?" The human tilted his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "Save you? No. But I will save the galaxy, and that is enough." The guards removed the locks. The chains clattered against the floor, sparking as they died. The sound echoed through the ship like thunder. The last human stretched his arms slowly, the muscles rippling like steel forged in fire. For the first time in decades, he was free. The ship shook again. Explosions louder, closer. The enemy was breaching the inner decks. Soldiers screamed, alarms wailed. The human stepped out of the cell, his bare feet touching the cold floor, his presence filling the corridor like a storm unleashed. The guards stepped back, weapons still in their hands, but none dared to lift them. They knew. Every alien in the galaxy knew. The balance of power had just shifted. The human prisoner had been released, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The moment the chains fell, the ship itself seemed to breathe differently. Every corridor, every trembling wall carried the weight of his freedom. Soldiers ran past, alarms wailed, metal bulkheads shook under enemy fire, yet all eyes drifted back to the human who now stood unbound. He stretched his arms slowly, rolling his shoulders as if waking from a long sleep. The guards around him stepped back, their hearts pounding, unable to look away. He was no longer a prisoner. He was something else, something greater. The human walked forward, calm and steady, as though the chaos around him did not exist. He passed the guards without a glance, but they felt the weight of his presence press into their bones. For years, they had been told he was dangerous. For years, they had laughed nervously at the stories of humans being death-worlders, born from a planet of storms and fire. But standing near him now, with the walls shaking and death clawing at their doors, they understood. The stories had been lies only because they were too small. The truth was far worse. The ship shuddered again, lights flickering as another blast struck the hull. The crew screamed as the enemy breached the outer decks. Weapons fire rattled through the corridors, and one by one, alien soldiers fell silent. Yet the human did not break stride. He walked through the trembling hall like a storm given shape. On the command deck, the captain stared at the monitors in despair. The enemy ships tore through their defenses without slowing. Fighters dissolved into burning wrecks. Frigates split apart under the weight of unseen weapons. The fleet had been reduced to fire and ash in minutes. Then a voice came through the comms, clear and sharp, almost too calm for the chaos. "I am coming to you," the human said. The captain froze. He had never spoken to the prisoner before, had never even looked at him through the cameras, but now the voice echoed in his mind, heavy and unshakable. Who are you?" the captain whispered. The human's answer was simple. "The last of your hope." The comms cut out. In the corridors, enemy forces broke through. Tall figures of shadow and steel emerged, their bodies shaped like blades, their weapons glowing with fire. They moved like predators, silent and merciless. Alien soldiers raised their rifles and fired, but the blasts seemed to vanish into smoke. The shadows struck back with claws of burning light, cutting through armor, through flesh, through hope itself, and then the humans stepped into their path. The first shadow raised its weapon, striking down at him with a blade of fire. The human did not move aside. His hand shot up, catching the weapon mid-swing. The aliens watching gasped as sparks exploded. Metal screamed under his grip, and then, with a slow twist, he snapped the blade in half. The corridor fell silent. The shadows hesitated. For the first time in their endless slaughter, they paused. The human looked at them, his eyes blazing like twin suns. He did not roar, he did not charge, he simply moved. His fist struck the first shadow, sending it crashing into the wall, its body breaking apart like shattered glass. The second lunged, but the human caught it by the throat and slammed it into the floor, the impact shaking the ship itself. The guards who had once feared him now watched in awe. This was why the galaxy whispered his name. This was why he had been chained. Not because he was weak, but because nothing could stop him. On the Council's homeworld, leaders watched the live feed with trembling hands. Their faces, normally proud and arrogant, were pale with fear. One whispered, "Now I understand. He was never our prisoner. He was our leash on something far worse." Another answered, voice hollow, "And now the leash is gone." The human continued forward, stepping over the broken shadows, his expression calm, almost cold. He reached the command deck, where the captain and his crew stood frozen. Blood and smoke filled the air, but none dared to speak. The human walked to the center of the room, his bare feet silent against the floor. He looked at the captain, his voice low but heavy with meaning. "Your fleets are gone, your weapons are useless. You called for help and now I stand before you. Tell me, will you follow me or will you stand in my way?" The captain's mouth went dry. His claws trembled as he looked into those human eyes. They were not the eyes of a savior. They were the eyes of someone who had already decided the outcome of the war. Slowly he lowered his head. We will follow." The human nodded once, then turned to the star map glowing above the table. Red markers burned across the galaxy, showing planets already lost to the enemy. His jaw tightened, his expression unreadable. For years, the galaxy had believed humanity was extinct. For years, they had believed the last human was a prisoner, locked, away and forgotten. But now the truth was revealed. He was not a prisoner. He was a weapon waiting to be unleashed. And with his release, the galaxy had entered a new age. An age where hope and terror walked hand in hand. The shadows outside regrouped, their fleets circling like predators, sensing a stronger beast had entered their territory. But for the first time, they hesitated. For the first time, they felt something new, not victory, not hunger, fear. The last human raised his head and spoke only 3 words. "Take me there." The crew did not argue. The ship turned, engines burning bright, heading straight toward the enemy armada. And as it moved, the galaxy itself seemed to whisper a single truth. The last human had returned. The ship roared forward into the void, engines burning brighter than they ever had before. The crew sat frozen in silence, stealing glances at the human who now stood at the center of the command deck. He had no armor, no weapon, no command badge. Yet his presence bent the air, as if the ship itself obeyed him. The alien captain tried to issue orders, but his voice faltered, trembling under the weight of the man beside him. The enemy fleet waited ahead, hundreds of dark vessels shaped like blades of night. They hovered silently, their forms devouring starlight, their weapons glowing faintly with an unnatural fire. For years they had swept across the galaxy unchallenged, and for the first time they seemed to pause. Perhaps they sensed what was coming. Perhaps they remembered what humanity had once been. The human raised his hand, pointing at the largest vessel among them, a black warship the size of a city. "That one," he said simply. His voice carried no command, yet the crew obeyed instantly. The ship's weapons shifted, targeting the monstrous vessel. Fear crept through the crew. They knew their weapons were useless. They had seen fleets burn, armies vanish, worlds consumed by these shadows. Their claws shook as they prepared to fire, yet the human's voice cut through their fear. "Do not aim to kill, aim to wake them up." Before the captain could ask what that meant, the ship fired. Bolts of plasma tore across the void, striking the dark vessel. The blasts rippled harmlessly across its black armor. No damage, no effect. The crew slumped in despair. But then something happened. The massive shadow ship turned, its weapons powered up, its dark hull glowing with energy. For the first time, the enemy did not move with cold precision. For the first time, it reacted. The human smiled. "Now," he said, stepping forward, "we begin." The enemy fired. Beams of burning energy lanced across the void, slamming into the ship's shields. The deck shook violently, alarms blaring. Panels sparked, smoke filled the air. The crew cried out, panic rising, yet the human did not move. He stood calm, eyes fixed on the enemy, his hands clenched like iron. The captain shouted, "Shields are failing, we cannot hold." The human turned, his voice steady. "Then stop hiding behind shields. Aim us directly at their heart." The captain hesitated. "That is suicide." The human's gaze pierced him, sharp as a blade. "No, that is war." With trembling claws, the captain obeyed. The ship surged forward, breaking formation, flying directly toward the massive shadow vessel. Enemy fire rained down, tearing through the hull, cutting through the defenses. Alarms screamed louder, but the human raised his voice above them. Steady. Every alien soldier, every trembling officer felt something awaken inside them. His words carried weight, a force that reached into their chests and pulled them upright. Fear shifted into something else, into courage, raw and burning. The ship plunged through the storm of fire, closing the distance. The human finally moved. He walked to the weapons console, placing his hand on the controls. The alien officer tried to protest, but his voice failed when the screens lit up. Systems that had been broken, dead, or drained of power suddenly came alive. Weapons hummed with strength they should not have had. The entire ship felt as if it had been reborn. The humans spoke without looking up. "Now fire!" The cannons blazed. Bolts of plasma ripped into the shadow ship, tearing holes into its dark hull. For the first time in the war, the enemy screamed. A sound, sharp and alien, echoed through the void, rattling every mind that heard it. The crew stared in shock. They had never seen these creatures bleed. The humans' eyes blazed brighter. They are not gods. They are not unstoppable. They bleed, and once they bleed, they can die. The words struck through the crew like fire through dry wood. The fear that had held them for years cracked and shattered. They roared with sudden courage, firing everything they had. The ship unleashed its fury, tearing into the enemy vessel, but the shadows were not done. Smaller ships swarmed forward, their claws tearing at the hull, their weapons lashing out in fury. The command deck shook, lights flickering as explosions tore through the corridors. Soldiers screamed as fire and smoke filled the air. The captain shouted, "They're boarding us!" The doors burst open, and shadow soldiers poured in, weapons blazing. The crew fired back desperately, their claws shaking, but then the human stepped forward. He did not pick up a weapon. He was the weapon. The first shadow leapt at him, claws burning. The human caught it mid-air, twisting its body and slamming it against the wall so hard the metal bent inward. Another shadow struck from behind, but he spun, his fist tearing through its chest, ripping it apart in a storm of sparks. The aliens watched in awe as he moved. He was not fast, yet the shadows could not touch him. Every strike he made, shattered bone, crushed armor, broke the unbreakable. The ship shook, but the crew no longer trembled. They looked at him and felt hope burn in their veins. One guard whispered, voice trembling with awe, "Now I understand why they feared him." Another replied, "No, you don't understand yet. This is only the beginning." The human stood among the broken enemy, his chest rising and falling calmly, his eyes glowing with fire. He turned back to the captain. "This ship is not enough. Gather every vessel left. Call every world still breathing. Tell them the last. Human fights, and when they hear it, they will rise." The captain's eyes widened. "You think they will follow you?" The human's lips curled into a small, cold smile. "No. They will follow survival. And I am survival." Outside, the enemy fleet regrouped, shadows swirling like a storm. But for the first time they had been struck, for the first time they had been wounded. And across the galaxy, as the word spread like fire, broken empires and dying armies lifted their heads. The last human had risen, and war had truly begun. The galaxy trembled as news spread like fire through the void. The last human was free. From the broken empires of the outer rim to the burning cities near the core, whispers carried faster than any signal. Soldiers who had thrown down their weapons lifted their heads again. Civilians who had lost all hope looked to the skies with new eyes. Every race, every world, every frightened child heard the same words: the human fights again. But not all celebrated. On the enemy fleet, the shadows gathered, their leaders cloaked in black armor, their eyes glowing like dying stars. They had cut through countless civilizations without effort. They had never feared. But now something stirred in them, a memory buried deep, older than empires, a memory of humanity. For in ages past, when humans still roamed the stars, it was they who had nearly burned the shadows to extinction. The war had been forgotten by most, but not by the enemy. They had chained him because they feared him. They had hidden him because they could not kill him. And now he had returned. On the command deck of the battered prison ship, the humans stood before the star map. Red lights glowed where enemy forces had spread like a plague across the galaxy. Whole clusters had fallen, but still there were stars not yet touched. The crew watched in silence as his eyes traced the map, sharp and unblinking. At last, he spoke. His voice was low but carried across the room like thunder. "You think this is war. It is not. This is the Shadow's hunt, and prey does not win by hiding." The captain swallowed hard. "Then what must we do?" The human turned, his eyes blazing. "We stop being prey. We fight as hunters." The room fell silent. No alien dared to answer, yet one by one they nodded. Something in his voice, in his presence, forced them to believe. The plan began. Across the stars, signals were sent out, messages carried not by code, but by a single sentence that stirred even the coldest hearts. The human is free. Ships hidden. In debris fields came alive. Abandoned fleets powered up again. Soldiers once broken stood and saluted invisible banners. Worlds long lost to despair sent their last fighters into the sky, and at the heart of it all was him, the last prisoner, the last human. The enemy responded with fury. Their fleets doubled, then tripled, pouring into systems like rivers of fire. Planets burned, moons cracked apart, stations vanished in explosions of light. But the galaxy did not break this time. Wherever the shadows struck, the human struck. Harder, On one battlefield, he stood at the front of a fleet of alien ships, his figure broadcast across the stars. Shadows swarmed, their dark vessels blotting out the light. The alien captains faltered, fear gripping them. But when the human raised his fist, every ship roared forward, their weapons burning brighter than they ever had before. He fought, not with technology, but with presence. Wherever he stood, armies rallied. Wherever he pointed, fleets struck with precision. The shadows tried to kill him 1,000 times, but every attempt failed. Fire engulfed him, yet he walked through it. Weapons tore at his body, yet he stood unbroken. And with each battle, his legend grew. Still, whispers of doubt lingered. Some asked if he was truly fighting for them, or only for himself. Others feared what would happen when the shadows were gone. Would he free the galaxy or rule it? The answer came in a quiet moment. On the command deck, after another brutal victory, the captain approached him. His voice trembled, but he spoke the question that haunted them all. When this war ends, will you leave us in peace? The human looked at him, silent for a long time. Then he spoke, his words sharp as blades. Peace is not given, it is taken. Remember that when this is over. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The weight of his words was heavy. Was he their savior or their conqueror? They could not tell. But the war did not wait for answers. The enemy gathered their full strength. A fleet so vast it blotted out the stars surged toward the galaxy's core. Billions of lives stood in its path. Every world trembled, knowing this would be the final battle. And at the center of the defending armada stood the human, his figure, tall and unyielding. He raised his voice to the galaxy, broadcast across every ship, every station, every hidden cave where survivors waited. This is not the end. This is where we take back the stars. You feared me once. You chained me, but now you will follow me. And together, we will show the shadows that humanity was never gone. We were only waiting. The galaxy roared as one. Ships surged forward. Weapons lit the void. The last human led the charge, his presence burning brighter than any sun. The shadows answered with fury, their dark fleet crashing into the defenders with the force of 1,000 storms. The stars themselves shook. The final war had begun, and as the galaxy watched, they understood the terrible truth. The last human was not just their final hope. He was their reckoning.